So welcome back again at the fourth and the last recording on the Workplace Ninja Connect event, the Workplace Ninja Connect podcast episodes. My name is Frans Oudenop, together with
Peter Daalmans,
my co-host, and as always, this day we are bringing fantastic topics on the table, Peter.
Two great persons, Jan Bakker and Sander Berkouwer. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys.
You both had sessions today. So what was your session all about, Jan?
Yeah, my session was about Passkeys, and my subtitle was "Are we there yet?" So
let's keep the answer.
Yeah, well, my session was about Passkeys.
Yeah, and let's figure out during this podcast if we are there yet. And you, Sander?
Well, I was scheduled to present together with Raymond Covalius, but he's unfortunately sick today. But we intended to present on Entra tokens and how to use them in PowerShell for all your script needs and things like that. And so I had to cover that on my own. I think I did pretty average.
You did a good job.
Okay, a good job.
I was in the audience.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
average.
I remember you doing the same session, I think, for the first time at our user group. And that was like a dry run for a bigger event. And I think you both used like 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
So were you able to fit it into 1 hour on your own, or?
Yeah, so I ran for 57 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah, it was 3 minutes to spare. And I had a couple of good questions from the audience. So that was awesome.
Yeah, because there's a big reason why you have this session, right? It's something to do with the deprecation of some kind of PowerShell module in...
And an API in the background.
Yeah.
Yep. That not a lot of people seem to... Well, in the audience, of course, they did.
Mm-hmm.
But outside in the real world, not a lot of people have actually noticed yet.
Okay.
Until it breaks.
Until it breaks. So do you see a lot of customers calling you and say, hey, I created some process and now it doesn't work anymore? Or?
I'm trying to make sure that my customers aren't impacted. So I try to be proactive and things like that. But yeah, there's some things that will obviously leak through the cracks of these announcements and these deprecation schedules. Yeah.
So I remember from the session that you also cover things around the app registration, secrets, certificates, and so on and so forth. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What you have covered in your session?
Well, mostly, and I think that's important to the audience, I covered the things that don't work and the things that they need to be aware of. And that is that client secrets and certificates expire by default. So you need to make sure that you're on top of that. Or else any application that you now configure well with the new Graph API permissions and things like that will ultimately break again, which was the entire purpose of not having it broken in the first time, in the first place, to make this conversion. And then, of course, we talked about federation workload identities and managed identities a bit. And managed identities are still now in preview.
Mm-hmm.
But the federated workload identity stuff is really cool, yet limited.
And that's going to basically help in replacing, I don't know, the certificates. And
all the stuff that sucks. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Talking about the PowerShell module that is phased out, the things that you're mentioning, what are the biggest challenges that people are encounter in the shift to move to the new one?
Yeah, so if you're expecting that all the scripts that you've written with the Azure AD Preview or MS Online module, and you think that, we went from MSOL, so get-MSOL something, or set-MSOL something, we went to get-Azure AD something and set-Azure AD something. So probably with the graph, it's just like replace as well, right? Well, definitely not.
Yeah.
So there's all these little things that are new in the graph, And that's also because, especially if you compare it to Active Directory, which is LDAP based, and the graph is OData based, what you see is that it's such a different beast, and it requires a lot of adaptation in your way of thinking to get that right. So it's not a simple Control H and let's go, unfortunately.
Right. You need to rewrite your full script to make it work again, to do the same thing again.
Yeah, but you make it sound like that's a bad thing. It's also a great opportunity to reconnect with business, and why do we have these scripts and why do we do this functionality?
Because we do it like this already for 10 years. So why shouldn't we do it now?
In 2 weeks' time, Active Directory turns 25. We've always done it like this.
Yeah. True. So, you will be celebrating a party then?
Of course.
So, Jan, your session was all about passkeys. So, question, why are passkeys fundamentally more secure than, for instance, traditional MFA methods like the app or SMS or one-time tokens?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, where we use, let's say, the legacy MFA methods, they're not phishing resistant, and that's basically the key here, because passkeys are phishing resistant. So what we see attackers do is to craft adversary in the middle attacks to steal the tokens with the MFA claims in it from the users and then replay them on their own system. And basically with passkeys, that's over. That's done. You cannot do adversary in the middle because passkeys are based on cryptographic infrastructure, PKI. So we have a public key, private key. You cannot sit in the middle and do spoofing, that kind of stuff. So that's why they are fundamentally better than passwords, of course, and the legacy MFA methods.
And you have the passkeys come in different forms, and
exactly
that's one, right? So.
Yeah. So we, in general, we have passkeys for years now. So you can think of Windows Hello for Business as a passkey. And that's their like what 8-10 years Windows Hello for Business,
something like that.
A long time. Yeah.
November 2015.
Exactly. Thanks. And we also have these security keys like the UB keys, which are also passkeys and which can also store passkeys. So we have different form factors, and now the newest kid on the block is the Microsoft Authenticator app also supports passkeys. So we have a device-bound passkey sitting in the Microsoft Authenticator app, and that will basically supersede the passwordless phone sign-in that we already have, which is great for user experience because you don't have a password, you just have number matching, but also that one is not phishing resistant, and passkeys are.
So the main focus is to make sure that everything is phishing resistant
and user friendly.
And user friendly,
because that comes with passkeys. You can unlock your passkey or use your passkey using biometrics or PIN, and that's the most user friendly way of authenticating that we have today.
Unless you forget your phone at home.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. But
did that happen to you?
More and more often as I get older.
Must be it.
That comes with the age.
Yep. It's an acquired taste.
Hey, Jan, based on your experience over the past few months, years, what are common challenges organizations have when implementing passkeys?
Good question. I think the main challenge is finding the right method for the right persona. So there's not one passkey that will rule them all. So you really need to think persona-based, and even maybe take the separation between desktops and mobile applications. Right? You can, for example, a passkey on Authenticator app is great on your phone, but if you have to do cross-device, then all kinds of stuff can go wrong. You need to scan QR codes. So native passkeys that's sitting on a device are more convenient. So, for example, you can use Windows Hello for Business on your desktop device and then a passkey and Authenticator app on your mobile device. And those two together work great. So that's the big challenge, to design something that works for every persona and in every use case. So if you have a environment with highly educated front office workers sitting on their laptops all day, it's not a big challenge.
No.
If you have to implement that same thing in retail, for example, or in healthcare, that's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah.
So that's the main challenge I see in the past few years.
Yeah.
So, you're mentioning it already. So maybe in hospitals it can be challenging, but are there more industries you think we either need to have some kind of different form factor as a passkey, or we're just not able to go passwordless all the way?
Well, of course, every branch has its own challenges, and everywhere we have the frontline workers, the people who do the hard labor and the jobs, and they basically don't care about security, not per se. So in every branch you have personas that need extra care, and sometimes it's not feasible to do phishing-resistant MFA, but luckily Microsoft Entra now has several choices and tastes and form factors of passkeys and phishing-resistant authentication. For example, the one that I didn't mention was certificate-based authentication. Perhaps that will fit those use cases.
Good old smart cards.
It's all around
True.
PKI, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, circling back to your question, yes, every branch has its challenges, especially the ones for the people on the floor, so to say. But I think for every persona there's a solution. The challenge is just to find them.
And then 25, if we look at this year, will it be mass adopted, or?
Well, that's basically the question: are we there yet? Yeah. I mean, I read an article about passkeys, and that guy said, well, the API is there, sure, the functionality is there, but then we have hardware vendors, ecosystems. Everyone has his own interpretation of that FIDO protocol. So they really need to work together to make it as seamless for everyone and convenient. So for now, what I found basically is that we need to think about how are we going to drive user adoption around passkeys. And that starts with simple things like, are we going to call them passkeys everywhere around the globe? Or maybe we can, in Dutch, it's called wachtwoordsleutel.
Yeah.
Are we going to stay with that, or are we going to move away to one uniform way of saying, okay, now we are now phishing resistant, we go for passkeys? And then a passkey works different on your Windows device than on your, let's say, your iPhone. Different terminology. So for the end user, it's really confusing. Hey, what do I need to do? You can tell me it's user-friendly and secure, but it's, to me, it's really confusing. All these new screens, and all of a sudden, I have to use a credential manager on my phone, like a password manager. Previously, I could store my passkey in my head.
Yeah,
right? You can't store passkeys in your head. Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe in 10 years.
NFC chip, and then
possibly. So that's one challenge for end users. So they need to do stuff, and so that's why I'm a big fan of integrated authenticators, so platform authenticators that are already in the device, so like Face ID, Touch ID, that can quickly adopt passkeys. But then again, the challenge here is how do we control them? Because I see already passkeys flooding everywhere. They can be on your laptop, on your phone. They can be in your password manager. They can be in Password Manager 2 that you also have on your phone. So how do you keep track? The end user will not know until they find out, hey, I got a new phone and now my passkeys are gone. So
that will be a big challenge indeed.
Yeah, we need to think about how to govern that.
I have a few young adults at home. I try to educate them to use a password manager. And if I hear this story with passkeys and that kind of stuff, that can be added into your password manager. But yeah, when I see how difficult it is for young adults to adopt these kind of tools to use to store all your passwords and to make that feasible for you as a young kid, so to say. It's a big challenge to move forward to Passkeys and so on. So
Well, I'm sure that someone brave will create something that will get them there, will lure them there.
definitely.
When Raymond and I present for high schools, one of the things that we typically show them just before the break is haveibeenpwned.com.
Yeah.
And then they enter each other's email addresses. Well, that quickly resolves quite a few situations around passwords.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's going to be functionality that we don't even expect right now that will drive that adoption of Passkeys.
Yeah.
And what I found really great in your presentation, Jan, is that, and I try to do that all the time too, is that, so I'm presenting this now. What if this becomes hugely successful? Then what's next? What will attackers do next? And it's like with WhatsApp end-to-end encryption, now we're targeting the endpoints, which is, well, the bread and butter of the workplace ninjas, right?
True. Food for thought, as always.
And on the password manager thing, everyone who's listening, I would recommend giving your kids a password manager for Christmas. Is the best gift you can get them instead of a Nintendo or whatever. And maybe they don't get it right now, but they will thank you later. Because yes, it's difficult to get that mindset to store everything on a central place and to be really consistent in that. So not making up your own passwords. No, always rely on your password manager.
Yeah.
But also, there are free password manager in your ecosystem, like in your Android or phone. But I would not rely on them myself.
No, and if you take a family subscription of any, and then you can share passwords also.
Yes.
Of services you enabled when the kids were really young, and if they get older, you can share the password, which is strong.
And before we could live without them, but now passkeys are coming into play. We need password managers.
Yeah.
Maybe in 5 years they call passkey managers, but for now, password managers.
Yeah,
we need them.
True.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I use that quite often and quite for a long time. My eldest children doesn't have a problem anymore. They are used to it. My third one is 15, and 2 years ago I gave them access to the password manager, and I think it was this weekend that he needs to create a password, and he wasn't able to do that because of the restrictions and so on. So I told him again, use your password manager, give it to you. But it takes 2 years from until now to get used to it and to get... I think the adoption for young adults is something that we can educate them.
Yeah, and you thought that IT pros were stubborn.
Yeah.
But Sander, one question about your session. What security risk should organization be aware of when using different authentication methods with Azure Graph? Using app registrations and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So what you see is that when you use client secrets, you can only configure them for a maximum of 2 years validity. If you use your own self-signed certificates, there's a limit to the amount of time that you can have that certificate, and it's 2 years. And if it's internet something, it's 397 days. But it's interesting how, especially that 2 year period, and I've laid that out in my session, is a period in which wherein consultants usually leave. It's something that people don't put in their Outlook calendars because it's so far away. And you have this app that just worked beautifully for 2 years and suddenly breaks. But why? Well, because everything is temporary in the new world. Yeah, we don't work for the same employer for 40 years anymore. I think we now at a 60% divorce rate when people get married. Yeah, and applications break in Entra.
And from the security perspective, like delegating rights to an app registration?
Yeah, what we saw, and that was, to me, that was eye-opening, is that Microsoft ended the support for SMTP and IMAP4 and POP3 towards Exchange Online because they were legacy protocols, and we need to get rid of all that legacy stuff like passwords too. And when they did, there were a lot of organizations that typically relied on interaction with the mailbox to get, for instance, information to get tickets into ServiceNow or Topdesk, stuff like that, initiated. And there was a lot of confusion with these vendors, and luckily one of them lives nearby and contacted me and said, so what do we do? Well, you get an app registration and you do it that way. Well, how does that work, and what do we need in API permissions? And it's like, well, you have a mail.receive as.all that you can use. And then you can just call the API and say, you know what, I want the contents of this mailbox, the inbox of the mailbox, and give it to me. And they did. And so that documentation came out. But my email was a bit longer than that. Because if you do that, you actually give your application the rights to look at all the mailboxes, including the one of the CEO, which is not something that you want to do. And you can scope that, down. And that used to be an Exchange Online thing. It's now an Entra thing in terms of scope. So that was tricky as well. But that didn't make it into all these vendors' documentation, unfortunately. So now we have all these great little security permissions stuff that we still need to address.
Yeah, and it's really important, right? So
I think
supplying
business,
too much permissions.
Yeah, I think business email compromise is a business projected to be a $28 billion industry this year.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. Sander, you're emphasizing scripting with Graph. Jan focusing on Passkeys and Passwordless within the sessions today. How can automation and scripting enhance the implementation of secure phishing-resistant authentication methods?
Shall I take that one?
Yeah.
So
I
what
think
you're
I think you wrote a perfect application for that.
Yeah. Well, what you're basically asking is, can we make this authentication methods? Can we do the application permissions also phishing resistant, right? So the distinction between a human being a phishing resistant and an application being phishing resistant. So you already landed on that before with this federation credentials, which basically uses like managed identities for your application. So managed identity is like a group managed service account in AD, or that compared?
Yeah, you can
which we had
or the new delegated service account in Active Directory.
Yeah, where the account is managed and maintained by Entra itself. So you don't need to have a password that expires. You just assign a managed identity with the right permissions, and it works for eternity. So I think that's the goal that we need to go to. So secrets and certificates are the passwords that we need to get rid of in Entra. Yeah. And we need to move to passwordless. But I've not seen phishing attacks on those kind of structures. So I don't think we need to get phishing resistant there. I mean, you cannot interact with that identity. It doesn't have a password, so there is nothing to phish there.
No, but in terms of information security, there's stuff that we can do. Of course, we have the workload identity premium licenses, so that we can have identity protection and conditional access applied to those workload identities.
Exactly.
And structurally, we have to, and I think I specifically use those words as well, we have to trust the fabric.
Yep.
So luckily, Microsoft hasn't been hacked in like ages, right? Just Midnight Blizzard.
Only last year.
In 3 times in the last 16 months, I guess. Yeah. So no worries.
And even if we're talking about automation, what kind of automation can we realize to provision passkeys or whatever?
Passkeys can be pre-provisioned, if you mean that. So what we can do with FIDO2 security keys these days is that we can pre-register them on behalf of our users. So we can use the Graph API for that. And what we see that vendors like Yubico already have sample codes that you can pick from GitHub and reuse, where you can quickly prepare these keys, reach them out, And that also works great if you have like the newest security keys with the enhanced FIDO 2.1 firmware. We can also use provisional PIN. Like I create a provisional PIN, you need to change that on the first use, just like we did on passwords.
Yep.
And we can enforce PIN complexity. So by standard, the FIDO 2.0, on top of my head, only required 4 digits, and it could be 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can say, we can, oh no, we can do it. We can enforce PIN restrictions to make it more complex.
Yeah.
Unless you have the FIPS compliant YubiKeys, they require 6 digits.
Yeah, but they're too expensive.
You get if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah.
4-digit PIN monkeys, to be exact.
Oh yeah. In this whole discussion, when we try to find the right credential for personas, costs are often on the table. Like, what's going to cost me? Like $100 per user. That's quite a lot of money.
Yeah, and I don't want to knock Yubico, but their first generation BioKeys, these were just falling apart. And I think for most personas, not needing to remember a PIN, and yes, I'm turning in that persona because I'm aging, but just having a biometric, something that I can prove that I am, and something that I can prove that I have, like a YubiKey, is the better combination.
I think so too.
Sounds like a good ending.
No, I have a few questions left, but now last question. Final advice. What would you give organizations that are aiming the bolster to defenses against modern threats using the technologies we've discussed? What advice for that kind of?
I think the best advice to give any organization is to turn their business around and start goat hoarding or sheep hoarding or something like that. Something safe.
Yeah?
Yeah.
With all the wolves, that's not safe.
It's
that's not safe anymore.
It's not a question if you get compromised. The question is if you are already compromised or not. So yeah, if you want to not have to worry about information technology, not have to worry about information security, yeah, go do something fun with your life. Create some wine or go herd some sheep or goats or whatever.
But even if they are still want to be in IT technology,
my condolences. Join the club.
Join the club. But what should they do?
I think overall, if as an organization you can get rid of your on-prem stuff and have everything behind Entra, I think you'll be better off and better suited for the future than many of your competitors.
Yeah.
And when I look back and look, we've done this a lot. We've knocked on Maersk when they got compromised. But the thing that they did actually was they realized that they could continue doing business based on WhatsApp. And I've seen a recent presentation from the CEO of Maersk, who is still in that function. And he said, when I saw that we could be a leaner organization, we can still get stuff done with the right, under the right circumstances, he quickly realized that it was like suicide to go back to the old processes. And then he redid the organization on a lean way, which is now one of their biggest competitive advantages.
Yeah. And for you, Jan?
Yeah, for me, I think don't focus on the edge cases, but also always look at the horizon and follow the roadmap. And if you don't have a roadmap, it's step one to have to come up with one. So if you're still relying on passwords, I think that will cost you some money, because passwords are heavily under attack these days. So then we told all our users, we need MFA. So then we go to MFA. And now we're talking, MFA is not good enough. We need to go to Passkeys. But there are challenges with every hurdle. like, my end users are not accepting this, right? Because we have this group of people and that group of people.
Now I have to give my people a phone.
Yeah.
Correct. So I would say focus on the vast majority of your personas and start with them, and always keep in mind that now we are on Passkeys, but that's not the end. I mean, I already glimpsed what would attackers do next. They will go after the tokens, right? So we also need to think about token theft. That will be the next big thing, if you ask me.
And luckily we have device-bound session credentials on the horizon for that.
On the horizon.
Yep.
Still very limited today, but that will be the answer, right? So
hopefully.
Yeah, that would be my overall advice. It's a never-ending story, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And we need to stay focused on the biggest group of our users and not on the edge cases that are maybe
that are
wrong
fun,
examples.
but
That are usually the loudest people in the organization. Yeah.
Most of the time, yes, but yeah.
Yeah, it has less impact, but sometimes more fun to do. But yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for joining us in this podcast episode of the Workplace Ninja Connect series. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Good fun.
Thanks, Peter, for co-hosting this day all 4 recordings.
Have fun tomorrow at MC2MC.
Yeah. Thanks for listening on this Workplace Ninja podcast episodes of the Connect event. Tomorrow we will do some other recordings at MC2MC. They will be published on their YouTube channel, so you can find them there. For now, I say thank you for listening. Like and subscribe all our videos, of course, and do a review so we can learn from you, from the feedback that you have. And I say until next time in a new version of the Workplace Ninja podcast. I say until then.